I'm interested in going beyond traditional translation. I think machine translation pushes us to that. Everything I've said has suggested that we've got to work with machine translation, but that's going to be doing lots of the traditional translation tasks, and we have to explore new ways to exercise our profession as cross-cultural mediators. This talk is on literary translation, basically. Literary and film and things like that. Cultural products translation. I don't really deal with literature much anymore, but I think very interesting things have happened in literary translation and are happening. And I think as translation scholars and students, we should be aware of what is happening, not in translation theory about literature, but in literary practice. Okay? Now, I want to start with an old innovator. Does anybody... It's gone. I left that there so people could read this. Don't touch it. Don't you touch it. I have my technician son here to mess up all the technology. You'll change? I don't change, okay? All right? It just doesn't work anyway. Does anybody recognize this verse? I mean the verses, but the verse style. Nobody? No. Okay. Does it sound old or new? Weird? Strange? Do you understand the words? What's strange about the beginning? And went down. Something is missing. There's a pronoun, or somebody went down to the ship. Who? I don't know. Okay. Keel to the breakers. Okay, the keel is the bottom of the boat. It's going into the waves breaking on the shore, going out on the sea. They raise the mast and they sail in a swart ship. What does swart mean? Anybody know? You could guess? Okay. Bore sheep. We put sheep on the ship and the bodies. We were crying. There were winds from the back. We went out. The canvas, the sail was bellying. So it's like out there, got a strong wind behind them. And the craft is Circe's Greek goddess. Okay, the Mediterranean. There she is. The trim coiffed is that she has short hair. Okay, the trim coiffed goddess. No. Okay. I'll play the author of those lines. The author, I don't know if it's the author. I'll play a reading of those lines, if I'm lucky.
And then went down to the ship, set keel to breakers, forth on the godly sea, and we set up mast and sail on that swart ship, bore sheep aboard her, and our bodies also heavy with weeping. And winds from sternward bore us out onward with bellying canvas. Circe's this craft, the trim-coiffed goddess.
Okay, this is the beginning of Pound's cantos. The cantos is a huge work. It's a work of his lifetime. And it begins and went down. It begins in media res, in the middle of doing something. Like all this stuff has come before. And it begins from a translation. This is a translation from the Odyssey. From Odysseus setting out from Troy after the end of the Trojan War on his voyage around the Mediterranean. And so it's Pound setting out on his voyage in the cantos on this huge poetic journey through myriad cultures and modes of poetic expression. The text, though, is not a translation from the Greek. He says, a few lines further on, he says, lie quiet, and he talks to a translator into Latin. And he happened to, he tells later, he was walking by the banks of the Seine in Paris, where you have the booksellers with all the old books, and just by chance he comes across this Latin translation of Homer and picks it up and he says, wonderful stuff, much better than the Greek, very interesting. Pound was very interested in translations, and he decides to translate this translation. But as he does it, he doesn't follow the Greek meter, and he doesn't follow the Latin meter. He goes back and he finds a meter in 14th, 15th century English verse, prior to the introduction of rhyme. Rhyme was an importation coming through Latin. Here we've got the verse of alliteration. Can you see it working? Set keel to breakers forth on the godly sea, and we set s. Okay, it's using the repetition of sounds to get the sound of the seas happening. Okay, heavy with weeping and winds from sternward. Whoa, 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 whoa. We're on the sea. The verse form was from the age when Anglo-Saxon was a culture of the sea. These were seafarers. It's from the age of the poem called The Seafarer. It's one of the classics that we study when we do English literature. So the innovation of Pound was to pick up a classical Greek text, Homer, the origins of Western literature, and not just put it into contemporary English, but to reinvent it and find a verse form that fitted the content and rework it. Now, when I read that in English, I remember reading it as a student and just thinking, wow, just wow. It's doing something that, as Pound said, made it new. I had read Homer, I'd read Lattimore's translation of Homer, I read Reel's boring translations of Homer, and suddenly I got something that, whoa, this is Homer? No, it's much more interesting than Homer. The literary translator added layers of meaning and emotion to the text and effectively made it new. This was Pound's program for translators. Make it new. Don't reproduce the old stuff, make it new. And making it new can mean borrowing from other places, like going back to the 14th, 15th century and writing this verse in the 20th century. The Lexis here is a little archaic, but not very archaic. Stuff like trim coiffed. You know French, you'll understand that in English. Swart, you might understand. In English we have swarthy, for somebody who's dark-skinned or unshaven, okay? It comes from German schwarz, or the Dutch zwart, okay, which means black. It's a black ship, it's a dark ship. I can follow. No, next slide, please. Maestro, thank you. I was interested in that. That word struck out to me as being slightly archaic, but I matched. You know, you can do n-grams for words. This is on Google, and it was very, very frequent about the beginning of the 20th century, which is when Pound was writing. So perhaps it's more archaic for me now, and that has become old. But the rest of the verse is very fresh and works as a translation, not to repeat the old, but to say something new about the old. Yes, please, Maestro. Yes, that was all I had to say on that. Very good. I think I really am going to need this. Now, yeah. Now, I'm interested in that possibility of translation, and I want to just give an illustration of why. Pound sets out on his journey to know about truth in human relations. He's a nutter, he has these crazy ideas about the economy, he's a fascist, he's not a nice person, but he's a great poet. And he does it to tell his contemporaries there's more out there. Like I was saying with Deleuze and Serre and that French tradition, there's more out there. And you want to say it to people because we are limited, very, very limited. This is you if you are monolingual. Is anybody here monolingual? No. So we have the advantage of knowing, well, perhaps L1, L1 and a half, you go to school, you learn to write. You have two systems going. But we know a couple of other languages. We've got L2. This might be you or me. All right? I know a couple more. I can have L2.5 if I can write that, and I can put L3 in. So this is me, and I think is that me? Could be me, I don't know. Pretty happy. I know some languages. I know lots of the world. I can make people look out at all these different cultures, right? But that's the translator among the 279 living languages spoken in China. We just know that little bit about the languages of experience in this country. There's a lot more out there that I don't know about, and perhaps you don't know about. Okay? Our languages are limited. And then, that's us among the 6,000 languages that are spoken in the world. 6,500, it depends on what a language is, how you define a language. We just know that little bit of it. And then, human experience that's recorded in language of some kind, spoken or written, but mostly spoken, can go back for 350,000 years. Where is our experience in that? Nowhere. Nowhere. We don't have, well, it's there somewhere. We're a little speck somewhere in that bit. So we know about the world of our languages. As Wittgenstein said, the limits of my language are the limits of my world. We can say languages, and we know quite a bit of world. But we know virtually nothing about all that experience but beyond our languages, except as it has come to us through translation. Everything we know about the world beyond our languages has necessarily come to us through translation. That's how important translation is. Not just for our everyday communication, but for the perception of our place in the history and role of humanity on that level. Now, if translations can become interesting and engaging, people will want to go out and discover more about the world and learn things and create knowledge. If, however, the translations are boring and unlikely to engage or excite people, then we are very likely to think that the limits of our language are the limits of our world. The work of translation should be to extend the world experience of the people using translations. And that's all of us. That's all of us. That's how important it is. And this, I think, on that level, on that very general level, this is where I think we turn to what literary translation does, which doesn't communicate information, it does a bit, facts sometimes. It communicates the language of experience, or language as experience, and should be appreciated as such on that level. I'm addressing here indirectly some arguments formulated or published in 1995 by Lawrence Venuti, whom you might have heard of, I hope. Who has not heard of Lawrence Venuti? Damn. Okay. Okay. All right. In this book, The Translator's Invisibility, Venuti formulates a very coherent argument which helps my purposes very much a bit. he says that the norm in translations into English in the United States, the United Kingdom, we might add Australia, is for the translator to be invisible. Fluent translations. Okay, this is his argument. And he says this means that the readers and the clients are not aware of the translator's presence, so they don't appreciate translators. Which means that translators are not paid very much, or they have lousy contracts. He talks about the relation with copyright and work for hire and things like this. It also means, it means, therefore, that there are relatively few translations, because translators are underpaid, so they don't do a whole lot of work, and that the percentage of translations in the culture is very low, 2 to 4% for the English language, which is true. And this is why Anglo-American culture ignores the foreign and becomes, I don't know what it becomes, there we go, my favorite citation from that book, imperialistic abroad and xenophobic at home. This is by Lawrence Venuti, the American translator, talking about, well, basically the United States. And he has become so famous because everybody loves an American who criticizes America. That's the best thing you can be in the world. Okay? Because you get up-to-date translation theory and you don't have to like America. Okay. Now, he's saying what I want to say. That translators should manifest their position to make the text exciting. I think he says it in a slightly different way. He thinks we should use foreignized pronouns, for example, or use interference in the language to make the reading process unfluent, difficult, resistant. So you're aware of that discursive presence of the translator. Perhaps like pound, with the word swart, or trim coiffed, or this strange rhythm that's not normal in English verse in the 20th century. Perhaps something like that. Who likes this argument? It's a very coherent argument. The interesting thing is it works both ways. Because the argument, the idea is this. If you change the way you translate and become visible, you will be appreciated, you'll get more pay, you get better contracts, there's going to be more translations, Americans are going to start to love the foreign, and they will no longer be imperialistic or xenophobic. Paradise in the United States. All you have to do is translate differently. Yeah? Do you believe that? No! It's crazy. There are so many other variables there, so many other factors that intervene. And in fact, the whole argument is saying, produce texts that are hard to read, and what happens? You'll get university students and professors reading them because nobody else will be able to read. Foreign literature becomes an elitist activity, separated from mainstream political life, and they'll get even more imperialistic and more xenophobic. I posit. Okay? So I like this book very much. Do you know why? In the 1990s, we were doing descriptive translation studies. Let's describe the norms. Oh, a lovely norm over there. Oh, they're very different in that culture. And look at we forgot to talk about how you translate. We forgot to address translators. I mean, translation scholars. And suddenly, out of the United States, this guy, who is a translator, starts doing translation theory. And he's telling translators how to translate. And it's great, because nobody believes him, but everybody argues about it. He stimulated discussion, public discussion about translation, and that book is cited enormously outside of translation studies by scholars and translators and readers and publishers. It really has had an impact on the image of the profession. I don't think it's changed the way anybody translates, I suspect. But it's been great for public debate and drawing attention to translation. In effect, it has achieved the visibility that it sought for translators, and it's done a lot on that level. As an argument, it's extremely tenuous, and the empirical data is very, very weak. I wrote a nasty review of that book, based on the false inferencing and the poor data and things like this. But I did say at the end of the review that I prefer Venuti's public intervention to the neutral stance of descriptive translation studies. I do think we have to be players on the public stage in order to address what translators do and get translators to talk, just to talk, to have debate. It's a very, very good thing. Any comments about Venuti? Anybody want to defend Venuti? Yeah. He doesn't like me very much. I don't like him very much. Yeah, he likes good food and I like good food, so we go to restaurants and eat. we talk about food, we don't talk about translations.
My language.
He speaks your language. All right.
6 million people.
He pretends to speak Catalan. Yes, this
He
is
is
true.
interested in all languages.
All right, we'll...
Venuti, he speaks my language. In Barcelona we have a language.
he speaks 3 words. Okay, doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. He tries.
This is my wife who speaks Catalan.
So
We've lost our friend from Alicante. He's at the back now? He's gone. How do you generate interest? How do you generate excitement in the receiver? That's my problem, okay? Now this, I posit, is not a literary text. This, I suspect, is the opposite of Ezra Pound on his cantos. But I put it here today because in Beijing you have a big ceremony for Belt and Road, BRI, Belt and Road Initiative. It's all on, it's exciting. Isn't that an exciting text, ladies and gentlemen? I'll read it for you in case you're not excited. The first is policy connectivity, which aims at establishing multi-layered macro-policy communication mechanism. Are you excited? You know what that is? Among governments, you know, but
the Chinese.
yeah, right. You have to back translate to Chinese to better synergize development strategies. Yeah. You have to be excited. Okay, now I got this from a speech given last year by the ambassador to Australia, Chinese ambassador in Australia, on Belt and Road. So it's on the website of the consulate, of the embassy in fact, in Australia. And it's there if Australians want to find out about Belt and Road. But it's not going to get anybody excited because we don't understand the first sentence. I mean, it's a straight translation from a straight official Chinese discourse. And it's not communicating. I mean, people in Australia they don't care about the Belt and Road, I'm sorry. Because it's that. It's what? Now, as you're aware, the Chinese government is very conscious of the need to present its policies and its culture to the rest of the world and to make people like China. Okay? That's the mission. Now, I suggest that this is not good enough. It's necessary, and as I mentioned to some of you, we've been testing the way Australians read this approach. We find that normal Australians do nothing. Australians who have nothing to do with China. Australians who deal with China, yeah. They'll go through and they'll pick up the pointers and they'll see the key points. And Chinese Australians, that is the Chinese diaspora in Australia, they'll read it and understand it. But if you want to move beyond that, you have to do something different. Now, the Chinese government is doing different things. They are really doing innovative translation. Oh, sorry, I'm getting to the innovative. This is the great Chinese poet and literary scholar Xi Jinping. And I would like somebody to translate this into English. Do we have a volunteer? No, that won't. You can't. She'll be too good at it. Yes, please. You're looking very confident. Just have a go. Just have a go. It's only your president. We won't tell him.
Peaches and plums.
Yes, yeah. Hey, we're good.
Speak.
Yes. Peaches and plums don't speak. They're fruits, of course they don't speak.
But they have attracted so many people to go under them.
Lovely.
For 4 years, more than 100 countries and international organizations actively support and participated in the construction of Belt and Road initiative.
That is really good sight translation. Congratulations. That's wow. Yeah. Okay, it's not easy. I know it's not easy. Okay. Now it's the same thing, right? It's the Belt and Road thing. That one, BRI. But we've got a bit of literature here. Okay. I think. Peaches and plums. I mean. He didn't just dream up peaches and plums, he's using a literary allusion to some classic text, and this he thinks will illustrate how the Belt and Road works. Does it? No, wait. What are the peaches and plums? What are they doing here? You know?
The initiative of the Belt and Road.
This is the translation on the website. As the Chinese saying goes, so that's good, so we know where it's from. Look, that a path is formed below the tree, so people walk between them. Okay? And then the rest is fairly straight. How should one translate the peaches and plums into English? Is this a good translation? What the hell is, I mean, how? So we tested this on lots of readers. You know, how do you understand it? And some of them said, I don't understand anything, but they said, oh, I know. You get rich fruits at the end. So the peaches and plums, it's like China going into the world and stealing fruit from Can anybody explain this literary device to me? You do literature, so many of you have a background in literature, as does your president, apparently.
This is a literary, in my understanding, this is a literary device which can be traced back to the Book of Songs.
Mm-hmm.
It's a kind of, you say something, and then you allude to another thing, which is called the Xin in Chinese.
Good. So what does that mean?
You know, the first chapter of the Book of Songs, it talks about the water birds, the birds. Actually, it's talking about lovebirds.
Good. So it's metaphorical language.
Yeah.
Good, I understand that. So who's the peach, who's the plum, and who's walking?
When it's translated into another culture, it is rooted out. You don't have
Well,
to
I don't know. I can ask you about the Chinese and explain it to me in Chinese. Now, I won't torture you with this. Okay. Now, what surprised us is we gave 3 translations. We gave that translation. We gave one that explained it without the citation. And then we had one that transformed it into an English saying, English language saying, which was, actions speak louder than words. Because one interpretation was that even though these people are not speaking, there are beautiful things to be done if we just go there. So it says, don't listen to what people are saying, look at what they do. And this was one interpretation, and that's what we put. Actions speak louder than words. Now, did the readers like actions speak louder than words, or did they like peaches and plums? What do you reckon? We tried this on Andrew Chesterton, great translation scholar. And he said, I don't understand. Actions speak, I understand that. Why? Look, that's what it means. Just give me what it means. Now, Andrew Chesterton is a linguist, not a literary scholar, and he thinks words have meaning. So he said, oh, if that's the meaning, just give it to me. Don't bother about the peaches and plums. Literally, that's what he said. Just, if that's the meaning, just give me that. Now, a lot of the Australian readers read that and they said, actions speak louder than words. They saw it as a threat. It says, forget about what everybody's saying, we're going to do it. Yeah? And they read the demetaphorized thing. Actions speak louder than words means watch out. Don't like this Belt and Road thing. Oh, dangerous. Lots of them though said, oh, that's so beautiful. Yes, we said, well, what do you think it means? I don't know, but it's really nice. And it sounds wise and Chinese. And it won a lot of very, very favorable comments from people who know nothing about China. Because this is what they think China should be. Classical, ancient wisdom with these imponderable sayings, which we Westerners are unable to calculate, but we'll study for years to get there. It worked very well. Even when we expected that this would be very problematic, it was far, far more successful than the speech by the ambassador. Oh, where's he gone? The previous one, okay? All right. Okay, but that fails. Your president knows what he's doing in many ways. He knows that using classical Chinese literature refers to the identity of the whole Chinese peoples, okay, because the literature and the language is very much the identity, and it appeals to foreigners. Although when he goes to countries and gives a speech, he always includes an idiom from the local language. And then he'll have his Chinese idioms. So he works the literature very well and very cleverly done. One of yours and 3 of ours. I mean, 1 local language, 3 Chinese things. And it works okay. Literature has its place in winning hearts and minds. Now, what I love is that somebody in your government, somebody is getting really clever. So to get the Belt and Road story out, you can find, if you Google around, you can't Google it, if you do web searches, the Belt and Road bedtime stories, where the pimply-looking Danish journalist, actually, tells his daughter about the Belt and Road as she goes to bed, okay, with a map and explanations for little kids. So even if politicians don't understand it, little kids for the next generation will understand it. And this is active, localization, radical adaptation, whatever you want to call it. They're trying to communicate to a very specific audience. Now, can we have, this is to a bit bigger audience, okay? And see if it works, technician. Belt and Road one. Yes, that one. Very good. Sound?
Yeah.
That's the maximum.
That's the
Sound?
sound, yeah.
Okay, you got the words down there, all right? So they're having fun. Belt and Road is really cool. It's on a loop.
Yeah, it's on loop, yeah.
Okay, we don't need a loop. We've seen it. Okay, we've got the idea. So, little kids, bedtime story. What are these? Young primary school kids. A cool song that they can sing along with the words at the bottom, and dancing. Yeah. They're gonna love Belt and Road. Now for a bit bigger kids.
BLT?
Yeah. Can we get? Oh, this is rockers, man. Oh. And you're in Washington. You're in New York. You're in India somewhere. No, Thailand. And it's got the Chinese there, which is cool because it's teaching a bit of the Chinese for it. Okay. That's enough. Okay, that's enough. All right. Work has been done to modulate the message to get to the audience. Right. Now, how it gets to the audience, I don't really know. I mean, I don't imagine many Western fathers are telling Belt and Road bedtime stories to kids. But the music is catchy, and the attempt to show it as an international thing that is young and modern and fresh, make it new, is definitely at work. The attempts are there. The missing link is delivery to the end consumer. But as I looked around here, I found in Laos, some rock singer has a song about Belt and Road that became viral, so I'm told, in China. So there is a response to this use of music to promulgate a political idea, and it might work. Who am I to say? What's interesting is people are aware that translation is not enough. You know, they're doing much more than translation. They're using music, images, dance, age, young people. Okay. Can translations become events like that? And I'm interested in what that notion of event might be. I don't think it's enough to say write in a resistant way or translate non-fluently. That's one thing you can do, might work somewhere. It's not enough to say just get little videos that kids can dance to. That's not going to really do the trick for us in serious communication to adults, at least. An event might be something like this Chinese translation of Finnegan's Wake, Joyce's impossible to read work, therefore impossible to translate, but Dai Conrong did it, a labor of love for many years. She did it using extreme literalism and copious footnotes. Lots and lots of work. And I've got an image there of the book being advertised on a billboard in Beijing. This, for us to have a translation advertised up like that in big, is, wow, that never happens to translations in the Western world. It happened in China. The first edition sold out very quickly. They had to print more, and people came back and bought more of James Joyce's Finnegan's Wake in Chinese. I fondly imagine that they bought the book, took it home, started to read and said, what? What? Can't make sense of this. Okay. Doesn't matter. They bought it, it's on the billboard, it's in the press, it's an event. And I suspect, I met Dai Conrong, the translator. She couldn't understand why are they buying my book? I think it's because Chinese are proud of the accomplishments of any one of your number, and to achieve this translation is a magnificent event in itself. Even if we can't read it or enjoy it reading, they will be supported because of the work involved, the work and the achievement. That's enough for an event. It doesn't mean you have to get the text and read it from beginning to end and enjoy every word of it. Some people will. Very few, I suspect. It means that it's out there on the public stage and creates awareness and pride and involvement. Okay? That's getting close to what I mean by an event. I want to look at some other examples, but before I do, I want to talk about this man. He's called Niklas Luhmann. He's a sociologist of systems. And in Luhmann's sociology, we live entirely in systems, and systems comprise communication. Only communication. Social life is comprised exclusively of communication. So in principle that should be of interest to us. The problem for me is that, when I look at his work, he thinks that between systems there is no communication. So we translate between systems and we establish communication, don't we? I think. And I've got this serious sociologist who says no, between systems there is no communication. There is only dependence and irritation. What? What is this irritation? Sounds bad, doesn't it? I looked it up in German, and the German was Irritation. Same thing, English word. Didn't help me at all. Okay? And so I'm reading through Luhmann, trying to figure out what he's talking about here. What does he mean by dependence, irritation between systems? Because it might be what translation does. He's not the only one. Walter Benjamin begins his essay on translation, the task of the translator, saying translation is not communication. Forget about the communication model. It's there to do other things, to show us the fragments of the vase that fits together in the bigger plan of things. Okay? Perhaps there's something there in Luhmann along this line. Reality of the mass media. Irritation refers to the form with which a system is able to generate resonance to events in the environment. You thought the peaches and plum was hard. This is irritation, resonance, boom, boom. The systems hit each other, something happens, there's a resonance to it. What does he mean though? I kept reading through Luhmann. Here's a longer passage about this irritation. It explains the two-part nature of the concept of information. The one component is free to register a difference, which marks itself as a deviation from what is already known. Make it new. This is how we learn. We get new information that is like what we know, but a bit different. So we can make that extra step, go in towards something new. That's the first part of it. The second part is the change that follows in the structuring of the system. So we learn something, it enters the system, and the other elements adjust. I don't know. Finnegan's Wake, Joyce, that kind of modernism enters the Chinese system. You don't really understand it, but it doesn't matter because it's resonating, boom, 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 something there, and the system adjusts and it has a certain impact, which can be big or little. But it's not communication in the everyday sense that we have within a system, where more or less, we agree to lie to each other by little bits. Remember what I talked about? Risk-taking in communication. I don't think communication means truth, it just means reaching agreement. Here, there's no kind of agreement, it's just adjusting to the irritations between systems. Very pessimistic view of translation. But I kept reading. Something's gone wrong there. Irritation is a part of all aesthetic experience. The play of forms functions as an irritation. Forms, the way the language is presented. That Anglo-Saxon verse form used by Ezra Pound is an irritation to our expectations of form. Okay? Order emerges from self-irritation at one point. Okay? One takes delight in sheer irritation and provocation. I like this strangeness. I like what it's doing to my language. I like these strange sounds. Something else is going on here. And this refers to the classical topos of the Greek has disappeared, but it means wonder or marvel. And the one that interests me is admiratio. Admiratio. Okay, it's a Latin term. What does admiratio mean? I kept digging. Admiratio comes from René Descartes, les passions de l'âme, the passions of the soul. This is from when people would analyze the emotions that people have. And have different categories for the emotions and discover, theorize how they fit together. We no longer do that, but we should talk about emotions, I think, even in translation theory. Look at what he says about admiratio. When upon first encounter an object surprises us and we esteem it new, make it new, or quite different from whatever we knew before, or from what we supposed it should be, then we admire it and we are astonished by it. What is this? What is it? It has my attention. I don't know what it is. It's not communicating to me. It's irritating my expectations. But, given that this can happen before we know whether this object suits us or not, prior to judging it, it attracts our attention. Admiration is the first of all passions. All the other passions have opposites. So admiration has no opposite. Since if the object has nothing that surprises us, we are not moved by it and we observe it without passion. Admiration, this first contact, is the surprise that engages our passions. The other emotions, hate versus love. But all the other emotions have positive and negative. This one is the prime one, prior to deciding what we think about it. If we don't have that engagement, that initial engagement with the foreign, prior to deciding whether you like it or not, or whether it's good for you or not, you're going to look at it and it's going to get your attention. That's the first step. If we don't have that, then nothing is going to happen between cultures. There's no chance of cooperation, understanding, anybody liking or loathing the Belt and Road Initiative, to take an example. It has to grab attention, and I think that's what we could do with certain forms of translation. A lot of work has been done in cultural theory recently, going back to a French theorist who really worked in the 1970s and 80s, radical Marxism. Alain Badiou, that's him there. Okay. And he wrote, his main book is called The Aesthetics of the Event. And Badiou took it on himself. He thinks everybody should be Marxists, but they're not becoming Marxists. This is when the French Communist Party lost lots of its followers following the Second World War, following the 50s really. And he couldn't understand. He said, look, I'm presenting reasonable arguments and logic to these people, and they're not understanding it. Reason is not getting through. And he says, no. We have to get people to believe in us simply because they believe in us. He says we have to create this political engagement as an event which becomes its own truth. There is no proof of the event, nor is it's not a representation of anything else. It is its own experience. I don't know. Do you go, ever been to an exciting football match? A great rock concert? You get wildly drunk one night? I don't know. Some experience that doesn't represent anything else. It's just this thing you become part of. And you believe in it and participate in it without questioning it. One of his books refers back to St. Paul in the Christian doctrine. St. Paul's letters, I think to the Corinthians there, says, look, I think Christ arose from the dead, but I can't prove it. There is no proof. You have to believe it. And belief will be enough. My grace is sufficient for you. If you have faith, it will make sense. And if you don't have faith, it won't make sense. So forget about the proofs, just believe. It's the call of any religion, of any political program as well. There is no proof. It's the event that takes us up. That you said we need culture to act as an event, to bring people together, to get them engaged, to get them out of their isolation and into the world, for him, for politics. It's a very interesting man to read because he's into aesthetics, radical left politics and religion, all at once. Okay. Now, I rather like his ideas, but there's something in European history that says, wait a minute. An event can be something like that. This is one of the Nuremberg rallies when the German members of the Nazi Party lost their reason in a collective fervor that led to what is still the most disastrous war the world has seen. The event can mean a loss of reason, a loss of individual control, a loss of checks. This is precisely why any German theorist will say, no, don't trust the event. Gadamer will say, no, have your own interpretation of every text that comes to you. Do not lose your individual interpretation. We did that back in the late 30s, 40s. We did that with disastrous consequences. So there's a double political reading here about the nature of the event and the nature of interpretation and hermeneutics, for that matter. I bear that German caveat. I want to create events, but I think we don't want to lose ourselves entirely in the event. I would like to see translations create something like that sensation prior to the segmentation of discourse into different audiences, prior into positive or negative evaluations. I think we should be able to do that, and I think I want an event that is for translation related to the text, that there is a text there, that every person can refer to the text sooner or later. Like in the Protestant tradition, they said, yeah, enjoy the Mass, go along with the church, hey, but you can read the text individually. It's a check on the cultural event. Okay? I want those two things to happen. I'll leave philosophy and give you some examples, and obviously you should open to the space of the other. Some examples of some of the rubbish that I actually watch, and give you an idea of what I'm not doing. This is a film called 300. It's the famous story of the Battle of Thermopylae, when the Greeks stopped the Persians. It's old history in Europe. At the narrow gates, okay? And in that film, as you can see, it's also made, it's sort of actors, but they look like comic. So it's working on the form as well. They translate the Greek literally. And I found this fascinating, because I'd heard about Thermopylae. Thermopylae, I made, as I was a kid, his age, younger, I made a model ship of the ship called Thermopylae. I know what it means. And they call it the Hot Gates. What? And then I looked at the Greek, therm, oh heat, gates, yes, that's what it means, Thermopylae. I got this revelation about what the Greek means. It taught me some Greek. this kind of translation, just morphological translation, can make something quite new. Again, this is a television series, Spartacus. Spartacus about Romans and fighting, and it's got sexy women too, that helps. But they speak English to each other, but the English is Latinate. It adopts the syntax of Latin. So they don't say something, they say, open mouth and lend voice to tongue. And it works. I mean, it's strange. And I say, what's going on there? But I think, okay, it's telling me how it's working in Latin for these guys who would be speaking Latin otherwise. And you can do that, and it doesn't upset particularly. This is a film called The Passion of the Christ by Mel Gibson. Later he went crazy. But he made two, as a director, he made two really excellent films. And one of them is this, on the killing or death of Christ at the hands of Pontius Pilate, who washed his hands. Same thing. Now this film is done in Aramaic, which is all Greek, Latin and Hebrew. So it's showing the death of Christ using the original languages. What? Nobody understands all these languages. It doesn't matter, okay? People followed it. They followed that foreignness and that strangeness. The highest grossing non-English language film of all time until 2017, Wolf Warrior 2 beat it. Okay, the Chinese beat Mel Gibson. You know Wolf Warrior 2? Yeah? Wolf Warrior saves Africa. Yeah. The other film by Mel Gibson is Apocalypto, the other great film, I think. It's a story of the Spanish conquest and of the Mayas enacting out, it's a road film, a chase film, and at the end the Spaniards arrive. It's done in Mayan with subtitles. And people follow this and enjoy it and can appreciate that difference and be interested in what's happening in the language and especially in the culture. These things are happening in mainstream cinema, in English language cinema, in Hollywood. It's Disney. So interesting things are being done with translation and with languages within the central, supposedly hegemonic culture of the world. Another example, I think it's my last example, you'll be happy. I work a lot with Greek. I work with Herodotus, who's the Greek historian, and I follow what he says about interpreters in ancient Greece. Look at these two texts. Which is new, which is old? Then, after that, for the omens to be favorable for the Spartiacs, when they were making sacrifices for themselves, was not possible. And that, for a long time, was theirs. Yeah. After this event, it was not possible for the Spartans, when they sacrificed, to obtain favorable omens. This was the case with them for a long time. It was actually, they killed messengers. Okay? And that was like, which do you like? Who likes number one? Who likes number two? Who have no idea what? Which would be done by machine translation? Number one or number two? Number one. Yeah, very good. Now, it so happens that that translation is from 2001. That other translation is from 1890. Okay, so this is the classic translation, which became, it's in Penguin. This is a new translation done with extreme literalism to show us what the Greek is doing. And I love it. Partly because I want to know exactly how they're talking about the messengers and the translators and the interpreters and how they're distributing. Herodotus believed in fate, that bad people would be killed, and if they're not, their sons would be killed, and if not them, the next sons. Okay, so this followed through history. This is new. This is old. Interesting things are happening in English translation. This is absolute visibility. Exercising extreme literal rendition of the start text. The trick is this, though. In English, we all have that translation already. So if I don't understand that, I can go back to that. Okay? If you understand the text already, you can make more adventurous translations, create more admiratio. I hope I finished. It's going on too long. Should I skip this one? Let's skip this one. Skip this one. Yeah, okay. Just examples. Let's just go quickly. Gayatri Spivak translates a Bengali woman writer, Devi, Mahasweta Devi, and in the book, in the translation, far more of the book is Spivak, giving her introduction to the translation, okay, and essays on Spivak than the actual person translating. So, extreme visibility. This is Spivak again. She translated Derrida into English. Her introduction is about 80 pages long. It's really indulgent. It's an essay in itself. And at the end, she's got this. The end of her translator's preface. The first part of this book, Writing Before the Letter, sketches in broad outlines. Now I insert my text within his and move you on, situating here a theoretical matrix. It indicates certain significant historical moments, proposes my name, certain critical concepts, Gayatri, Chakravorty, Spivak. These critical concepts are put to the test in the places of this work: Iowa City, New Delhi, Dhaka, Calcutta, Boston, Nice, Providence, Iowa City. In the second part, Nature, Culture, Writing, Its Time, July 1970, October 1975. What is this? It's wonderful. It's her signing off on her preface and interdispersing this with Derrida's translation, with the first words of his text, that the translator's preface intermeshes with the actual translation. So her voice necessarily becomes that of the text you're going to read. Incredibly innovative. And done within not mainstream, but literary theory, cultural theory in the United States. That's how Derrida's book begins, Grammatology. It's the main text for deconstruction. Okay, go quickly. Clive Scott is this crazy guy, professor of French poetry, expert in French verse forms. He says in his book, Translation and the Rediscovery of Reading, that translators are readers. And so the first thing you have to do, is show how you read the text. So, look at that. That's the English poem, and he translates it into English. That's his reading of the poem. This is some guy stuck on a train station in the middle of the English countryside and wondering what to do. It's the poem. So over here he says, I imagine there's a big tree there, or it could be a dragonfly. And around the guy on the platform there are these birds singing. So I'm going to put in the sounds of the tweet of the different birds that are around there. And that's his translation. You look worried. He's making the point. We know that we can use concrete poetry and typographical resources as means of expression. Why don't we do it when we translate? To transform the poem into something new. And then, this is the front cover of his book, he says, and it could be a dance. So he writes, dancing figures on top of the text as well. And he says, this is all the translation. It's what I imagine could be happening in and around this poem. Make it new. Absolutely. Something strange. Really? Is it good or bad? I don't know. But it's certainly worth attention. And then you apply that to interlingual translation. He works intralingually here, but you can apply the principles interlingually. I'm going to, how am I going for time? I think it's
8:06.
Thank you, sir. Right. Okay. I'll give you a blast, I think. With a friend in Spain, a fellow teacher, we have poetry translation competitions. Right? We get a text, I do a translation, he does a translation. And we were translating this classical poem, 20th century, but it's a poem that all school kids learn. By Machado. If you don't know Spanish, it doesn't matter. I was interested in the form of it, and I wanted to get the rhyme. So to get the rhyme, the first thing I did was figure out the words I needed for the rhyme. And then as I looked around this text, I found on YouTube lots and lots of versions of it. And I found versions of it in song. And I found a version of it in flamenco music. Machado was from Seville, so flamenco was from there, so this was interesting. And then I found a little kid singing the song. And I thought, well, there's this resonance of this text in Spanish culture. Remember resonance, irritation? It's not this text. It's all the things that this text has been used for in Spanish culture. And I can put it together. I can put it together with just those words. How would I translate it? I would basically get those words and then take the content and rearrange the content so it fits to the words, right? That's how you do rhyme translation. So I think, no, what am I doing? Instead of rearranging the words, why don't I rearrange all this stuff that I've got on YouTube? And put that in and see what happens. Can we see what happens? We can't. Next video.
Oh, yeah.
Yay.
Hey. Wait. Dead. Se representa ahí
infantil, no cantando la bici, 1000 veces 100, 100.000, 1000 veces 1000, 1 millón. Los comerciales escuchan monotonía de lluvia en los cristales.
Okay, you may not understand anything about that poem, but it's a poem about school, about learning numbers, about rain coming down, about Cain and Abel in the Bible, two brothers fighting each other, and then about millions and billions of people fighting each other. Machado invented the term Las dos Españas, two Spains opposed to each other, and the poem is about that. You might have understood that from the images, and in the background you have flamenco and a little kid singing it, so you've got bits of the culture. All right. Without the sound, it's terrible, I agree. Okay. But at least I tried to do something with image and voice, with the resources we have available to us now. Literature has no reason to be printed on the page anymore. And I think that's my problem with Clive Scott. Can I go forward one more there? I mean, I can do a straight translation. That's my straight translation of the text. It's not that difficult. But I think we should be doing far more than just translation with these things. This is my version of the Belt and Road bedtime story. You know, do something different, make it new with the resources available. These days, the thing that's happening in literary text, not literature, cultural products, is not printed on the page, despite the billboard in Beijing. It's being done with video and the voice. All this stuff is happening out there, and it's exciting and it grabs attention. We have tremendous resources. When I say we need more than translation to get our messages across, I think I'm talking about more than just the media that we use in translation. Okay? Let me finish as I can. I can't. Where am I?
Would you like me to go for you?
No? Is that it? Okay, all right. That's about all I want to say. I think that this will be a summary of where I'm trying to get to, but I said it wouldn't really have a summary because I'm making a call for experimentation, to get out there and do new things, new forms of translation, which means new media translation, in addition to the linguistic work that we are able to do and we can keep doing. It's not instead of, it's as well as. Okay, I thank you for your attention and I welcome questions.